Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
What we said was we'd know a lot more about what we needed to expect or what we might see because of several things that were going to be going on, several meetings and that kind of thing. Most importantly, was actually the Kentucky High School Athletics Association Board of Control meeting on Friday. And then they did like a work group in the morning, and then they put together their proposals, and then they voted on them in the afternoon. And what it came down to was this, and I think this has been the message from Julian Tackett and the Board of Control overall for the last 2 months. Now, not initially, not if we go all the way back to March. I don't know that they had a message then other than we'll see. And maybe that's still the message now. But part of the message is, to me, that Julian Tackett says not all sizes fit the sports. So we may make decisions based on sport to sport. Districts may make their own decisions about who plays and what sports play and what schedule they play, that kind of thing. And I just think that's what we kind of have to hold on to, is that's a possibility. Because out of Friday's meeting, what they decided was golf will carry on as planned. So start of the season is July 15th in terms of like cuts and practices, official practices. Matches start July 31st for golf. That's been the schedule forever, going back in the sports calendar, and that's on path. Now, other sports, it's a different story, and we don't know the answer to that wholly yet because they can't really do practices and cuts on starting July 15th. They can continue voluntary workouts and that kind of thing, and then they will have another meeting maybe about July 28th and re-examine the other fall sports. And as of right now, they could all start on August 3rd. And all this totally depends on a couple of things. One is not so controversial, I guess. If our COVID-19 infection numbers continue to rise in Kentucky as they have the last week, then those things are probably in jeopardy. One way to, whether you will like it or not, but the Japanese have proven it, one way to help prevent that rise is everybody put on masks. And last Thursday, Governor Andy Beshear mandated masks for all people in Kentucky, if you're going into a business and that kind of thing. Or if you're outdoors and can't be 6 feet from other people. So we do have control of our destiny to some degree, I think. But then again, the KHSAA will make that decision, for other sports going forward. And the other thing, John, is that I don't think we can sit around and expect things to look this year, which is another thing Julian Tackett says. 2020 will not look like 2019 or 2021. That's his hope. Meaning, we may have different schedule set up. Sports may start at a different time. We may have to change how we do practices. All these different things may happen. But, the ambition, the KHSAA's ambition, and their eye is on having fall sports right now.
Well, that's the good part.
Yeah.
It's, I was pleasantly surprised, I guess you could say, Friday. I thought it could have been worse.
Yeah.
I was glad that golf got to go ahead. Mm-hmm. So they're on. And there's some minor changes but they can play, and they're allowed to practice and do all that stuff. And, they can start their matches coming up as well.
Yep.
Some minor adjustments. They can't take the pin out and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're only allowed 2 people to come watch it, things like that. But, they're at least those kids are getting a chance to play. Everything else, the fall sports are just, they continue on as they've been continuing on,
mm-hmm.
with limited practicing, no contact, obviously. They only can go 6 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
The non-fall sports, you can't share athletes anymore. So if you have a basketball player and a soccer player, the basketball player just strictly goes to soccer. There's no sharing.
Right.
And basically the winter sports and the next year spring sports, it's up to your local Board of Education. They don't even have to let them.
Right.
And that's a local decision. But right now the fall sports outside of golf are just continue on the way they're going to, which tells me that if we're going to get a chance to play, that probably that's going to be pushed back as well.
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard to think that you're going to allow a football team to start really practicing August 3rd and then play their first game 2 weeks later. That doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Right.
So it's good, it's bad. I mean, it's overall it's kind of a wait and see deal, and I was happy with that. And if you listen to the commissioner's comments, he really emphasized that in a lot of ways we do have some control over this, and in terms of our numbers have to go down. I mean, we can't keep going 450, and the numbers have skyrocketed, and if that continues on, I don't have a whole lot of confidence that we're going to be able to pull this off. So, that's one of the things, that the numbers have to change again. And, hopefully with this mask order and
people adhering to the mask
order. If they do, I think people are already just, I can't imagine that just all of a sudden people just figure it out right now, today that, that's probably a good idea. I think people are locked in on their decisions. They're either going to wear them or they're not going to wear them. And it doesn't matter really what you can say. I'm tired of arguing over it, and I mean, personally, it's kind of it's an argument that you're not going to convince anybody. So we'll just see how that does, and if we can get half our people to do that, I think it could be an impact. But we'll see. And boy, I hope we get a chance to play. We were talking off air, and one of the troubling things right now is that there's a lot of negativity. I guess I told you off air that this past week was about as bad as the week in March when everything started getting canceled. And this week was sort of that way, where a lot of the colleges were, we're going to talk about this later, but some of the conferences have already canceled, and some other things, and that, I just tell you, that makes it hard on high schools. Yeah, and it makes it very difficult for high schools. So I've got my fingers crossed. I think the kids need to play, but I also understand there's a medical emergency going on. Hazard High School, by the way, up in the mountains, they had I think 9 players and coaches got. They shut down for a couple of weeks. They tested for that. So, we talked last week that high schools don't regularly test. Right. But you have to think, it just makes sense. There's probably, in every county and every school, there's probably cases. But, most young people are so asymptomatic and they have such little problem with it, you can't hardly tell if you even got it or not. Right.
And one of the things that Tackett pointed out, talking about Hazard, and that's not the only school, but some of the schools that had shut down programs or practices for a couple of weeks, or all things for a couple of weeks ago, one of the things Tackett pointed out was that's the idea. If you find an issue with your program or at your school, then that's the point, is you go into that quarantine for a couple of weeks, shut down, clean up, and all that kind of stuff. And some people have had a negative response to that, but I mean, look, John, I'm just like this. I love sports. My favorite thing in the world is to cover high school sports. All the moments that I can remember of the purity, to some degree, of high school athletics has meant a lot to me over the last 25 years of covering this stuff. And I don't want to see it not happen. But I'm also thinking to myself, for it to happen, I'm willing to make whatever personal sacrifice I have to have that's not going to impede that. And one of the things that I did see also over the last week was a lot of people who had been either sitting on the sideline about the idea of wearing the masks, or were actually negative toward it, have turned around and started wearing masks and advocating for the wearing of masks. And that will have an impact because different people follow different people or look at different people for their guidance. And it may be your preacher, it may be your president. I don't know. I mean, whoever it is you look to, as if those people are demonstrating mask wearing, then their followers are more likely to do it. And I think that's a positive thing that has happened in the last week as well, because you're talking about the dominoes and feeling like it's in March. I mean, when you start seeing the Big Ten and the Pac-12 and the Ivy League and I think the National Junior College Association and the Patriot League and others start talking about, we're going to shut this down, or we're going to play only in-conference schedules, that that starts getting into people's money, and when it starts getting into people's money on the high end, they start thinking to themselves, well, I guess we need to change the way we're dealing with this. And that's a positive thing, I think, that happened in the last week off of the comparison to the March dominoes.
Well, I hope so. I hope you're right. I mean, it's I'll wear if somebody tells me to wear a balloon on my head and that will help get sports back. I'll put the balloon on my head.
Right.
You know, whatever it takes to stop the spread of the infections and to give us a chance to get back to more of a normal life and watching sports and watching our kids play. I am 100% behind it. You know, the AAU people are still playing. You know, they are going and. You know, that's kind of the dichotomy with what's going on right now. You got, you know, colleges are on the verge in some places of stopping completely. High schools are kind of in this middle ground right now, and then you got AAU softball and basketball they're playing with restrictions. With you're supposed to the social distancing and masks, but there are big AAU tournaments all across the country.
Yeah,
and. I mean, that's going on.
I just think for people who like to make that a comparison as just a sport-to-sport comparison, if they can do it in AAU or whatever, or USSSA, why can't they do it in high school? Well, I mean, when you get down to it, the KHSAA is responsible for a lot more than just the kids on the field.
True.
They are responsible for the coaches, the teachers, not necessarily, the teachers who could be interacting with the program in some way. They are responsible, and I don't mean responsible in that they take responsibility for their actions. What I mean is, if they say yes, we're going to do this, and it affects some of those other people, then they're going to feel responsible for it. They may not be able to be held liable in a court of law or whatever, but that doesn't change that they've got, when they're thinking about their decision making, they got to think in a broader concept.
It's totally different. I agree.
Than the AAU or the USSSA, because basically the AAU at all levels basically says, you parents, if you want to engage your children in this activity, we'll provide you a venue. But you're responsible for your children or your team or the people around it. We're not. I mean, that's kind of the way that works just from the get-go, and the same thing for USSSA. I mean, it's a lot of travel, baseball, even AAU basketball teams are made up of people who are friends and family to begin with.
Soccer, club sports.
Yeah, I mean, so those things just have a wholly different kind of responsibility, and if a group of parents want to do that, I mean, they're free to. I've always felt that way. They're free to do that if they want to, but that's not the same thing as when you're dealing with a school district or you're dealing with an organization like the NCAA or the KHSAA or even the SEC, Big Ten, or whatever. I mean, their range of responsibility is a lot greater than some parents with their children.
I agree. I mean, you're right. It's different in one sense. In another sense, I guess the strange part is they're both offer sports, but they do it in a different way.
Yeah, well, they put the responsibility for running those sports in different hands.
That's correct.
One, they're putting that responsibility in that board of control and Julian Tackett at KHSAA for how they're going to manage things and who all is going to be involved with that.
Taxpayer supported.
And the other hand, you're putting that responsibility in the parents, and they can make that decision whether or not they want their child to participate.
AAU, which is not.
Yeah, I mean, and so it's just, and so that's why it's not an apples to apples comparison necessarily to say, well, they're playing softball, why can't we play softball?
But it is confusing to people, though.
I get it. I get it, because I think people
confusing it to young people too.
Oh yeah, well, and just generally speaking, people don't understand responsibility. So. I have two children. When they were in high school, we did the travel baseball and that kind of thing. And I knew fully well that in those environments, I was responsible for my children's actions. When I turned them over to a coach at the high school, to some degree, their practice time I'm not involved with. Their time around that coach I'm not involved with. I've now abdicated my responsibility necessarily to the coach to make the right decisions for my children in those environments. And that's just totally different. But I get, yes, it is confusing as to why you can't play one if you can do the other in these different environments. But that's the baseline difference is just the depth of responsibility and the breadth of the responsibility, really, I think, of the people who are in charge of those arenas. But in the end, to me,
this next 2 to 3 weeks is really important. I think that is clear.
Yeah.
It is vitally important that the numbers start to turn. I mean, it's not going to turn overnight because there's always a lag anyway.
Right.
But there has to be some semblance of more positive numbers, in my opinion, if we're going to pull this off. I've said all along this situation's got to be managed, but it's harder to manage it when the numbers are rising so much. But we got to be able to manage this to get through this. And, you know, it's been last week was not a good week. Hopefully this is a better week, and hopefully, you know, I got my fingers crossed that we can get this pulled off for everybody's sake.
Yeah, and I still say, and you and I have talked about this like off air and whatnot, and even we discussed it a little bit last week on air. I mean, I still believe there's an avenue for having fall sports. It's just that we may not wind up with district schedules. We may not, outside of golf, I mean the other sports, but especially soccer and football. We may wind up with a way to play some games so that we can give these athletes an opportunity, you know, to play the game that they love to play. But it just may not be the schedule we thought we were going to be playing. It may not be against the teams we thought we were going to be playing, and it may be up to the boards of those local boards of education to have an agreement. You know, that hey, we're going to let these play each other. It may be like, I don't know what they call it here, the Sky Conference, the old Sky Conference kind of setup where you play your old Sky Conference opponents, that kind of thing, because I think the KHSAA wants to figure out a way to have a playoff system, but if you can't guarantee you're going to be able to play your schedule, it's going to be hard to set up a playoff.
Well, let's just worry about getting games in before we get to there. I'll just take games right now.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, let's just get games, then we'll worry about playoffs.
Yeah, and I think in a couple of weeks that may be where we wind up with when it comes to like football and soccer is, you know, we'll figure out who wants and can play games, and the KHSA will be able to say, if this is what you want to do locally, you can do it, because we don't see any way where we can make this work as far as playoffs and that kind of thing. I mean, we could be there, or things could be rosy, and they could say, hey, we're just going to roll along, and we're going to back up the first week.
November, we could be like Japan.
We could be. We can make that effort. Alyssa Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, back to the golf thing. As we mentioned, they have golf going on right now, junior golf in Kentucky. Some of our players in the area have managed to get in some tournaments and some rounds, I guess, out here on these tours. And then the high school will be able to start July 15th. That is, Wednesday, I think. And then, you know, they're on tour. They're on schedule to be able to play their events, their high school events, July 31st. I think we may even have one here. I don't know if the Trojanettes Classic or if it's the Lady Scotties. One of them, I think, is scheduled for July 31st.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it. I don't know if you can have the – you know, in the past you'd have 32 teams or whatever come in.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible now. I haven't read all the golf rules, but I would think that would be very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So, you know, these tournaments, once the high school starts doing their tournaments, will probably be more I guarantee it's going to be more restrictive than what you're doing outside of high school.
Well, and a lot of times, like the one I just mentioned, what will happen is the school will bring an A and a B team. So I imagine you'll wind up with some restrictions just in whether or not you can bring an A and a B team. There may just be – that's why you wind up with like 16 teams. You may wind up with like 4 B teams also playing in the tournament. And so you may just be able to bring just your A team, and it may be structured a little more by how the state tournament is going to be set up if they get there, you know, so that it's – the tournaments themselves are going to be self-limiting because of the guidelines for the numbers and how they are able to play together in groups and that kind of thing. Because I think the groups are groups of 3 instead of groups of 4 right now on these junior tours, I think is the way it's set up. And then they have to maintain, as you mentioned, you know, they can't touch the pin and that kind of thing. And
well, it would be pretty safe to play with me as a golfer. If you're good, it'd be really safe to play with me because your ball wouldn't be going where mine is.
Right? Yeah. We'll have a bunch of woods tricks for you.
That's right.
Yeah, just go on, keep playing. I'll catch you up, maybe.
And it's going to be down the right side too.
There you go. But one of the events that did happen, they had Thursday. They had the Bluegrass Golf Tour Junior Series at Crosswinds over in Bowling Green, and Nina McMurtry from Glasgow, she shot 5 over 77 in the girls 15 to 18 group and won that one. And then Jamison Corbin from Barron County, he won the 12-14 group. And this kind of cracks me up. Jamison and James Corbin, I guess they're both play for Barron County. Last year I kept mixing them up whenever I take photos of them. Took me a little while to figure out which one was which. But he played in that same age group. And then Jace Cook of Glasgow played in that group, and Jackson Moore. And Caleb Neitzel was also in that same 12 to 14 group. Who are the other? Oh, okay. And then in that 15 to 18 girls group, Allie McCoy finished 5th, and Bailey Birdsell was 6th, and Grayson Flatt 7th. Lena Harlow tied for 10th. They're all Glasgow kids. And then Griffin Jackson, a young guy from Glasgow, he won the boys 10 and under group. They only play half the course, like front or back, and I don't know which one.
That's all I do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I always thought that was kind of neat, though, when they would have like these younger folks. They would let them play like just a 9, and I thought I was
that's
like,
plenty.
Yeah. I mean, that is the 10 and under group. I don't know how old Griffin Jackson is, but he's 10 or under, and so I would kind of get, if I was 10 years old, I'd get kind of tired of walking that thing and lugging around some clubs as well. But I mean, the upside is we've had the. I think Chase Landrum has been out playing in some of the amateur tournaments and did pretty well in one. I don't remember exactly which one it was. A couple of weeks ago, he did pretty well in one of them. And we've got several area younger golfers and getting a chance to play because going back to what we were talking about in March, everything was in jeopardy, including the summer golf tour, which is where I think a lot of these younger players kind of get their chops in. You know.
Well, golf has. It's the one of the sports that has not had a huge, I guess you'd say, letdown. I mean, the golf courses are packed in a lot of places, and it's an outdoor sport. And if you want to social distance and you want to be careful, you can do it at the golf course if you want to.
Right.
I mean, you can be in a separate cart. You can play by yourself. You can just play with 2 people, and there's a lot of things you can do if you want to.
Yeah.
And if you don't care about it, you just play in foursomes and so forth. But at least people are outside, and golf. It looks like to me is, I think tennis is too. To be perfectly honest with you, golf and tennis are 2 sports that are easily played in during this pandemic that we're under.
Yeah. So I mean, those I guess the thing is that I think we would have thought going into the high school season we'd be concerned about our players not had gotten enough reps in, but they're getting them.
They are.
And so I think that bodes well.
I'm
overall.
pretty confident they're going to have a golf season.
Yeah.
Very confident.
And even the.
No matter what the numbers do, I think golf's going to be safe.
Yeah. It's kind of been proven during this summer, as you were mentioning, not just the youth, but at the professional level and all, that there are ways to run golf tournaments.
Right. And they've had some positive tests. Hasn't been any evidence that they contracted the virus while playing.
Yeah.
There's still some traveling aspects. Mm-hmm. But the numbers, even on the PGA Tour, is still with all the tests, it's less than 1%.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. And it's like you said, I mean, in a lot of ways, especially when you're talking about the PGA, I mean, they can hunker up wherever they need to be and then go and play in their tournaments and then go back wherever they came from without a whole lot of mixing in the process.
That's right. And it's worked pretty well with them.
Yeah. I didn't write this down on the list, but I was going to mention the NASCAR as well.
NASCAR's pulled it off well.
Yep. And they had a race, 2 races at Kentucky Speedway over the weekend, right?
4.
4.
Yeah.
Right.
They had the truck.
I forgot about that.
They had the 2 JV ones, I call it, Nfinity or whatever it's called. That's the JV version. Then they had the big one, which was yesterday. And a very exciting finish.
Yeah.
Kentucky gets – I'm not a big NASCAR person, so I rely on Warren Cunningham for everything. And
he needs to get his own segment, the NASCAR Minute or something.
He knows his NASCAR.
Does he?
Yeah, and Kentucky for years has gotten a lot of unfavorable reviews track's bumpy or whatever, and it's a lot of the drivers complain about it, but I tell you what, they had a great finish yesterday. The end of that race was I watched the end of the race. It was really good, and they're going to Bristol this week, and I think I saw where Bristol's going to have up to 30,000 people there.
Really?
Yeah. Now it seats 120, so that's 20% or whatever. So so that's going to be Wednesday night.
I guess that's akin to the Louisville City soccer.
They pulled it off.
They did indeed.
Now, we'll see. But that gives me a little hope. Even with their numbers going on, our governor allowed that. They had 4,600 at the professional soccer opening. It's pretty much the only event in the last 6 months in this country that actually had people there.
Yeah.
I mean, actually people, 4,600 people, and it was on ESPN2, and they looked like to me that most of the people had masks on, and 4,600, I think it seats 12,000, something like that. So it was about a third, which is fine. So they pulled that off, and that that gives you a little glimmering of hope. The Kentucky Derby is September 7th. That's coming up in close to 6-7 weeks, and they're going to have people there. So you just cross your fingers, and these venues are, maybe they can pull it off. And like I said, the more events that can be pulled off gives a little bit more hope to high schools.
Yeah. You're mentioning the NASCAR and how sometimes the Kentucky Speedway there in Sparta gets a bad rap, and I still think most of it comes from the traffic jam that was created the first year they actually ran NASCAR there.
That's true.
When I don't remember if it was the county executive there or who it was that said, we just didn't know there were that many NASCAR fans. It was like, well, you only have one way in and one way out. You don't need a whole bunch of them to have a traffic jam. But
I think they fixed that.
They did. They added a lane and actually added a second way in.
Right.
But it actually, I think the last couple of years, the drivers have enjoyed their races.
It's been better. That's right. They still complain it's a difficult track and it's bumpy and this and that. I don't understand all the
They must not have driven on the interstate on the way in there.
That's true. I don't understand all the stuff about it. I get the impression it's not someone's favorite track, but it seemed like I know the finish was tremendous this past weekend.
Yeah,
and it's kind of neat to watch.
Yeah, I didn't see how they set up the stands for the NASCAR race, but like the Louisville Football Club,
they didn't have anybody at the NASCAR.
Oh, they didn't have them at the race?
No. Bristol, the ones coming up,
okay,
can have up to 30,000.
Got you. So
no, the one in Kentucky had nobody.
So at the football stadium, at the soccer stadium, what they did was they didn't rope off sections. They roped off like 4 sets of seats, rows, and then so it was spaced out like that. And they really had a plan, and I guess that's what they did was submit their plan to the governor's office. It
was reserved seating only, temperature checks.
Yep.
You could sit next to somebody if they were in your immediate family.
Yeah. So I just thought that
masks were required.
Yep. I thought that was they didn't just start planning this. They'd been planning this since they knew that stadium.
And when I saw on TV, most people when they showed the stands had their mask on.
Yeah. It looked like a pretty high compliance rate, and it just looked like a pretty well executed all around thing.
It can be done. Mm-hmm. It can be done.
Yep.
And of course, that's a professional group. Mm-hmm. That's a little different than college and high school. Those are professional paid athletes who choose to do this.
Yeah.
That's a difference, but it still can be done.
Yeah. Well, as long as people keep demonstrating ways to get it done, that's a positive.
I agree with that.
Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, one of the things I did, we mentioned this in the first section to some degree, was last week we already knew the Big Ten was going to move or just have in-conference only. There was speculation about other conferences. The Pac-12 at that time was speculated upon. They've now agreed that they will play just play in-conference only for fall sports. And that does have an impact for other conferences that had scheduled games against teams from those conferences.
Michigan or whatever, Michigan could stay at home and play Michigan State, Central Michigan, Western Michigan, Central Michigan if they wanted to. So, only playing within your own, I guess it gives you some flexibility to move games around if you have to. But it has a huge effect on, as we talked a little bit last week, non-Power 5 conferences.
Mm-hmm. Well, and back to the commissioner's point, the Big Ten commissioner's point, and this is basically the Pac-12 commissioner's point as well, is that they have control, and this is all about control, over the programs within their conferences, and they don't outside. And so I guess they feel like it's not about the travel, it's about institutional control.
Yeah, since we don't have an NCAA
czar
that has any power over football.
Right.
Zero, none. That can just have standard rules for everybody in terms of everybody has to be tested once a week and blah, blah, blah. That's not the case in college football at all. It's embarrassing, actually.
Yeah, and so, that's why – but I'm with you, though. I would not be the least bit surprised, and we're going to talk a little bit here just in a second about the National Junior College Athletic Association, but I would not be the least bit surprised, to your point there, that the SEC and the ACC would not be conversing to figure out, if these other conferences are making this choice, this is going to hurt some of our games. How can we arrange maybe to play each other as long as we can work out the safety situation between the conferences? And it's kind of natural for the ACC and the SEC. The Big 12, meanwhile, I don't know. I think they're going to be stuck playing in conference only because of a couple of reasons. One is the number of their schools that are in Texas and in that part of the country at the moment. With the number of cases in Texas, and also they're going to be they're kind of geographically landlocked as a Power 5 between the Pac-12 and the Big Ten.
Well, they're not going to get any help from the Pac-12.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't a shock that they shut down.
Yeah,
no, that's not a shock.
So they don't really now they're in a position where they don't have another conference that they could kind of naturally geographically team up with and work out some situations. They're kind of going to be in limbo. And I imagine, their other part of the deal is this. Their other conference commissioners are looking around saying, do I really want to send my team there?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I imagine that's part of the discussion that is going on, that we don't know about publicly. But so, back to your point, though, that makes the SEC and the ACC kind of natural partners in this circumstance. And the Big 12 would be just the odd duck out. I would think, out of the Power 5, considering what the other two conferences have already decided.
Yeah, and I can see that happening, and I'm glad they're waiting. I think the best thing that you can do is to wait a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't understand what the hurry is, but I think in 2 weeks we'll know.
Yeah.
They may make a decision before that. The SEC got together today, all the athletic directors. I haven't seen any. I didn't expect to have a big announcement today.
No.
Other than they're concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's the Pac-12 and the Big Ten have already made their calls.
Mm-hmm.
Ivy League's already moved everything to the spring. I think the Colonial Conference, which has Army and Navy in it, Patriot Conference, they've moved theirs all fall sports to the spring.
Mm-hmm.
So they're already making their decisions. So it's going to come down to and listen, we talked about in the first segment. There will be enormous social and media pressure put on on the commissioner of the ACC and SEC. I'm just telling you, they will enormous amount of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how they handle that.
Yeah, and back to the National Junior College Athletic Association, they handle the JUCO colleges around the country, and people probably don't realize now. They probably have seen the Last Chance U documentaries, so to speak, on Netflix, and they probably have a better idea now of how much the JUCOs are feeders to college programs these days, especially, I think, the non-Power 5 programs. So many, in basketball and football, so many of these players sign or out of JUCO. And they've moved all their fall sports. Well, they've moved football, men's and women's soccer, and volleyball to the spring. And this has got to affect recruiting and signing of athletes significantly in those programs. And I have a feeling that they did not make this decision without some sort of discussion with NCAA member schools to try to determine how this will affect their student athletes.
I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. I just don't see. I just think it's going to be difficult to play. I mean, you can play football in the spring. There's nothing physically wrong with that, other than it's a tough turnaround playing a schedule in the spring and then playing again in the fall.
Well, and I guess that's the thing.
And if you have any pro aspirations at all,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're projected first round pick, you won't play at all.
Yeah.
You're just not going to play because the draft is going to be in April. You're not going to be playing through the draft. No way.
I would guess that to some degree this is an easier decision on the JUCO side of things because a lot of these players play only 1 year, either their second year or first year, if they're going to move on and play at a 4-year institution. And so the JUCOs don't necessarily have to make a decision about those same people coming back and playing for their institution in that following fall.
No, they'll just play a lot of football next year.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but it also still leaves the question. I mean, even with like the Patriot League, I mean, how many people say, you know what, I think I'm just done then?
Could be. I mean, and I with the JUCO, let's just be honest with you, they're not on TV. They don't have a TV market, and I can't imagine they have a large, even local following.
No, they really don't.
So, I'm not really for sure exactly what their philosophy is on this, other than they think it's safer.
Yeah.
I mean, that may be primary it.
Well, and it's a different kind of setup.
But they don't need the sports for any financial reasons per se, I don't think.
Well,
maybe scholarships, I guess.
I would say your southern JUCOs and maybe in Texas, they do get a fair amount of football revenue.
Right.
That probably takes care of much of everything else.
See, I shouldn't have said that because I don't know. We do not really have do we have a junior college in the state anymore?
No, not like that.
I mean, is Spalding in Louisville still around?
It's not a JUCO in that way.
Okay.
I think if any 2 years that we did have converted to 4 years, or they just don't have sports at all.
Okay.
But they are big in the South. They're especially big in Mississippi, and I covered East Central whenever I was down in Mississippi. And football is big in the South, no matter what the level is. And so there was a fair amount of money that was made through the JUCOs in football, and some degree in men's basketball. But otherwise, they were a net negative.
Okay.
So it does impact them that way. And there are some, like out west and in Texas and places like that have football feeder programs. I mean, that's kind of what, if you look at the ones in Mississippi, a lot of them are feeder programs to your 4-year institutions, which is when you look down at your 4-year institutions that have JUCO players, you'll see a ton of them. They come out of the Mississippi JUCOs, they come out of Texas, and that kind of thing, maybe out of Georgia and Florida a little bit. But so it does have an impact there, but I just don't know. What I don't know is how it impacts their ability to move on, whether they, to play at the next level if that's what they plan on doing. And most of them do.
Well, who knows how any of this will work out next year if there's no college fall season or sports season in football, will they grant all those people another year like they did the spring one?
Yeah,
then you're talking about a major jam.
Yeah, I mean we discussed this when they did that.
Yeah,
you just don't know what the unintended consequences are of those actions. But then again, as we learned,
let's hope we don't get that far.
Yeah, but as we also learned though that they they granted the extra year if your institution wanted it, and so there are no easy answers, I guess, when you get right down to it. But there are some curious questions, I guess, to be asked about some of the decisions that are made.
Well, yeah, even if football is not played in a lot of high schools, that affects recruiting for next year too.
Yeah.
If you're a senior and you don't play, how do you? I guess the colleges are recruiting you based on your junior year or whatever, and a lot of players improve a lot between their junior and senior year.
Yeah.
There's an impact down the road for that as well.
Yeah. Well, I go back to what I've said. I think to end these past two segments, and I won't be saying this in the last segment, I don't think. But anyway, I do still have faith that things are going to pan out in a positive way. And because if we want to make the effort to try to make things better, then we can certainly attempt to do so. And I believe we will. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, officially today, the Washington Pro Football Team announced that they are discontinuing the use of their names, and
They retired it.
Yeah, retired it.
The Redskins.
Yes, the Redskins. And what do you think about that?
I don't care. I mean, I see both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, I do. I could see it from one particular point of view to be offensive. I mean, you wouldn't call a team the white skins or anything like that now. So I could see that being offensive. But the way it was, the way I look at things is normally if you're part of a sports name or a college name, it's generally a sign of strength too. Mm. So I can see it both ways. You could see it as being a sign of strength, and you could take it the other way. But it doesn't, change the name's fine with me. I mean, I'll be honest with you. That's okay as long as you don't take it too far. I mean, I think you can run with these things too far and start challenging every single thing where, there won't even be any nicknames. It'll just be the Washington or something like that. But I can live with this one, and I can understand this change. I can understand it.
I'm going to tell you a little story. Whenever I covered sports in Mississippi, I covered the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, and I think I've told you about this before. And I had never really thought about the name of the Redskins or any other thing of that nature because I'd never really been around a Native American tribe, or I didn't even know they were actually in Mississippi before I started covering their high school. And so one day, this guy, his name was Barry Jim, and I'd written, there was this is 98 or so, and so they were talking about changing the name, and I wrote a column talking about, no, why would you want to change the name? Kind of the same thing. I thought that was a good thing. And so he called me up. He was good enough. He called me up and said, "Hey, why don't you have lunch with me? I want to talk to you." I'm like, "Okay." So I go and have lunch, and he makes a point. He goes, "You wouldn't name a football team the Blackskins, right?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "No, I don't guess you would." He said, and what he explained to me was this. He goes, "We as Choctaws, we don't mind if you want to call your team the Seminoles or the Choctaws or the whatever. That's actually a good thing."
Right.
But this is not the same.
Right.
And then he said, neither is like calling a team the Indians, because that's just, if you want to call them the Muskogees or whatever, okay, fine, if you want to do that. And you have some sort of relationship with a tribe and that kind of thing.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And, and he kind of was like, and it's, you don't want these certain common images because they're just caricatures.
Right.
He goes, and we're still here. And we're still alive,
I agree.
So we just don't like that.
That's what I said. It's fine with me, and it actually is going to be a financial boom for the ownership. Anytime you change colors, change names, it's all the new shirts and hats and all the it'll be a financial boom for him.
Yeah,
as long as he doesn't change it to a worse name.
Well, and Daniel Snyder, let me just say, I don't trust him to do this right.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah, and I feel like they're kind of starting off on a bad foot in a way, because I would like for them to do what the Baltimore Ravens did when the Browns moved to Baltimore. That's what I'd like for them to do, is put out
not a bird.
Well, no, just a call, because what they did is they enlisted people to send them names.
Yeah,
and and they came up with the name of the Ravens, and I was like, I thought,
how about the Golden Doodles?
The Golden Doodles, that'd be good.
Yeah,
I'd say they should call them the Rubber Stamps, but.
How about the Lobbyists?
The Lobbyists. That's exactly what they should be called. Oh, gosh. They should call them the Gators. But, I do think I really would like to see them open the door for the fans to have an opinion, or at least set forth some ideas. I would like to see that.
Maybe they are.
Yeah. It didn't sound like it. It sounded like he and Ron Rivera are going to get together and make a name for the team.
Well, who cares? Just pick a name, sell a jersey.
Yeah.
I mean, people will give him 1,000 suggestions anyway. So
yeah, that's true.
Right now the leader's Red Tails.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
That was a part of the military. I I think it was the All Native American Indian Air Force group, maybe back in World War I or World War II.
Okay.
And that right now is the leader right now. I've also heard Warriors.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would work or not, but I kind of like lobbyists.
It feels like the most fitting, doesn't it?
It does.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, look. I mean, that's fine if they want to change it to something that is still the heritage of some sort of the name of the team. I don't even know how they came up with the name the Redskins to start with, to be honest.
1931.
Well, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. They didn't have Red Grange on the team, so I mean, you know,
it was back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
But you know, it doesn't. I think I can live with this one. I mean, because I can see I can see this one now. You know, some of the other ones that you know just don't take it too far. But this is fine, and I think it's kind of exciting too as well to come up with something different.
The funny thing was, my friend was an Atlanta Braves fan. So while we're having that lunch, I asked him. I said, "Well, what about the Braves?" And he's like, "Oh, we don't have a problem with that. That's a celebration of something good."
Well, the Braves have already said they're not changing.
Well, and they said it before, but
of course Daniel Snyder said he wouldn't change in this either.
Yeah, well, he wasn't changing until the dude from FedEx said, "Yeah, I think you need to change it. You need to take our name off the stadium."
And Nike refused to sell the clothing line with the Redskins on it.
As they always say, once the money turns,
that was it.
Everything changes.
That's exactly right.
But again, I going back to the names thing, I don't, you know.
There's a lot of dumb names.
Yeah, there are a lot of dumb names. They're really. I mean, we can just start with the Cleveland Browns. For instance.
Well, that was named after the Brown family.
I get it, but they should not have brought that team back and given it that name.
I mean, it's after you, right?
Yeah, well,
there you go. See?
Further proof that should be something else. I mean, I mean, we talked about this before. I don't think of the Cleveland Browns as they are now as the Cleveland Browns. They should have given them a different name. And that's sort of like they've changed the Charlotte Bobcats to the Hornets now. I mean, why?
I don't know.
I mean, it's just. I mean, was a Hornets organization so fantastic historically speaking that they needed to give the name back?
I like Bobcats.
I did too.
Let's have Washington Bobcats.
I mean, because the Hornets are now the Pelicans, right? They're in New Orleans.
That's correct.
So I mean, why even bring that back? Anyway,
I don't know.
Plus, that teal color scheme is not 2020. That was 1991. I
like teal.
Is that your next team is going to be in teal and orange?
Yeah, I like it. I like a little teal.
All right. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.